we were making films about, with the working class. And UCLA is very strange because, it's set right in the heart of one of the richest, communities in the country. Brentwood, Bel Air, and places like that. And a lot of the students who attended UCLA were, and they lived there, and they were, in a way, interested in politics and doing films about the working class. And they made these films that sort of romanticized the working class and sort of reduced it to, their problems and issues to sort of simplistic terms. But in real life, at least the life where I came from, it was totally different. And so I was reacting to those films as well as to the films Hollywood was making at the time. And so I wanted to do a film that didn't reflect my values, but reflected, in a way, what was going on in the community without me imposing on it.
Man, Black gonna call the police, man. Hey, man, I just told him that. Come back, man. No, man. Hey, man, shit, I got something for him. No, man, I got something for him. Oh, no, man. No. Yeah, but that's fuck. No, man, I'm gonna fuck him up. Man, I ain't playing.
I wonder, my little darling.
Living in the South Central, as a group of us, we all shared, I guess, the same outlook in many ways, until I went to college. And then when I came back, and I never really left the community, but when I, was with my friends, I found that we began to change, there was sort of a disconnect in certain areas. You sort of realize that that you can't be a spokesperson for any particular person except yourself, and you hope that the films you make share, to some extent. You can share things with other people, your experiences. But it was with these kids that I grew up with, I saw that I had a different mindset, And so I knew that what I would suggest wouldn't necessarily apply to them.
Again tonight, while the moon is
You can't really make films about people. You can only put together some sort of narrative that that somehow tells a story, without you manipulating it in a certain way. It's all manipulative, of course, but where it isn't so obvious in a way, if you know what I mean. So it's nothing that I made up. I just put things that I saw in the community in a narrative and let that speak for itself in a certain sense, When I first went to UCLA, I didn't have a clue about what kind of films I wanted to make because, I came from a community that was totally different, and you go to UCLA, it's affluent, people got all these privileges and things like that, kids were making films about, flower children, hippies, and nudity and all this kind of stuff. But I had a great teacher, Basil Wright, who taught documentary films. And Basil Wright was a great teacher to have at your earliest stage at UCLA, because he taught documentary films, and he introduced me to, filmmakers like Yoris Evans and people like that, Grierson, Robert Flaherty, P.L. Arantz. And those are the kind of films I really thought, this is what I want to do, make films about issues. I think there were a lot of us who came to the film department and got involved in film were there mainly because we wanted to tell our stories, and we were acting against negative images and stereotypes that Hollywood had produced since Birth of a Nation. And so there was a lot of talk about what is a political film and what is a black film. Like among the Hispanics and Asians, they were doing the same thing. During the 60s, it was a great period. Everyone was active. At least all of my friends were, in some sort of protest or using art as a means for social change. There were writers that were, there was a number of these little gatherings where people, read poems about what was going on in the, and what was going on in the country, I ran into this young guy who was a teenager, and I saw him on the bus every now and then, and and he had these overalls on all the time. So we just happened to sit next to each other, and I sort of asked him, I said, what sort of work do you do? And he told me that he worked in a slaughterhouse, you know. And he told me how he slaughtered these animals. At that time, they did it with a sledgehammer, you know, so God, you know. And I can imagine a person doing that, you know, 8 hours a day, every day, you know, doing that sort of business. And so that gave me the idea. Stan, I think I suppose would be a person that you would find in the community, you know, suffering from neurosis from having to do all these different things that you don't particularly like, stressed out because of the job he was in, trying to you know, maintain some sense of who he is as a person. But the thing that's positive about him is that he endures, you know, and I think in real life you don't necessarily, you know, do ABC and get the girl, whatever it is, or necessarily win, or that from that point on he doesn't have any more problems. But in real life, what I've seen is people just struggle, and you know they fall back, but they continue going and they struggle and they make some gains and they lose some and they keep going, but the thing that is inherent in all that is that you are resilient. You know, you are a survivor. You know, and I think that's what Stan is, and I think that's positive. So I don't look at him as a negative figure or a depressed person in that sense, because he's still striving to be a human being. How did I find the various actors and their experience? Well, most of them were friends of mine, and I grew up with, except for the three leads. And Casey Moore I didn't know at all. I met her. She was in this program in Hollywood for people who wanted to get into acting and into commercials and things like that. Henry Gail Sanders, who played Stan, worked in the same building I did, and I saw him in the elevator one day, and he had his face lower, I mean, looking down. He was very depressed looking, and just the right face. And I said, "Have you ever acted before?" And I never talked to him before until, you know, this moment in the elevator. He smiled and said, "Yeah, I worked on this film," and it turned out to be Bobby Roth's film, who was a student at UCLA in the film department as well, and that's how but the rest of them were basically friends of mine.
Now let me tell you, man, it's a 1 to 5 proposition offhand. Me and him face a dark day if we have to go before the magistrate.
Hey, man, look, I don't want to hear this.
No, I don't want to hear it. Stan, wait a minute. Let the man go telling it to you.
It was, well, shoot when you can, you know. It was like, it was this sort of freedom, I mean, because I was using people who were not film people, and they had their weekends I was, you know, disrupting, and they would show up sometimes they wouldn't show up, you know. It was just casual like that, you know. And for example, like a friend of mine who I was using in the film, we shot some footage of him, and he couldn't make it one day, so he said, could someone else take his place, you know? And I said, it's not like you playing football where a person injures himself, you bring in another player and he carries on, you know. It's not that simple, you know. Once we have footage on you, you know, it has to continue, you know. You just can't just have people darting in and out playing the same character. But it was fun, you know. It was mostly scripted. I mean, it's all scripted totally. I mean, there's maybe 1 or 2 scenes in there that was some additional lines or some minor improvisations were done on the set. But no, mostly everything was like storyboarded, and because at the time, you know, when we were at UCLA, it was, even though film was cheaper then than it is now, it was still costly, you know, and we had this notion that if you storyboard it, you can have, you know, everything laid out, and in the long run it'd be cheaper. I got a Louis V. Mayer grant from UCLA, like $3,000.
Get out my way, you scared. Who you talking to? No, you're not talking to me.
It was very cheap going to UCLA. I mean, you know, and the film's cost was almost nothing because, you know, you could get everything free. basically you pay for the film and processing, of course, but you know, you have the editing facilities there, you have mixing facilities and things like that. So, and all you have to do is pay for the cost of the film and development, and you know, and you have a film. I suppose all told, I don't think it was, I don't know, 5,000, 10,000 or something like that. I got scars from rock fights, you know, from, I mean, not these dirt rocks, but, you know, these like rocks, you know. And we did all sorts of stupid things when we were kids. So they were doing that, you know, and you just, and it's awful because I remember after I shot it, said, oh, I should have had those kids do that, you know, because if they would have fell. But they did it anyway, you know. I mean, they were doing it because, you know, a friend of mine lived in those apartments, you know, and so you walk by, you look up, and there's these kids jumping over the roof, you know, all that kind of stuff. So it was an everyday kind of a thing. I mean, you learn these lessons on how to become an adult, you know, and how to survive. And I think the whole idea of the film was how these kids become conditioned to this sort of moral ambiguity, you know, and how to survive, you know, what you have to do. And these contradictions in doing so. And so, I mean, we were faced with that. You know, we were told, you know, no matter if your brother's right or wrong, you know, you protect him and all that sort of thing like that. And you see, and it's also, partly it's from the point of view of kids, you know, witnessing these things, you know. No, I mean, kids are great. I mean, they're just magical in the sense that tell them what to do, you know. And I learned how to work with them during this film in a sense because I treated them like, I treated him initially like undeveloped beings in a certain sense. Because I was telling this girl when she was in the kitchen with her father, with Stan, how to drink the water, you know. So, you know, you go and drink the water and like that. And then, no, she did like that. And I said, no, you go drink the water. And then she did the same thing. I got lower and lower, and she got lower and lower because I was trying to get to her level, you know. And she was doing everything I was doing, like getting lower and lower, and I was trying to say, no, but do this. And so I didn't realize till after a number of takes that she was repeating what I was doing, you know, copying me. And it was so obvious, you know, and then I realized it. And so I just started at that point just telling them what the story's about, you know, and what they're feeling. They just did like that. Because, you know, they know all their lines and all the other characters' lines, you know, and that's what's remarkable about kids, you know. They can remember. They still have all their gray cells. But they're also very, very insightful, and they know more than what we think. Most of the people in LA when I grew up they were all from the South. Well, the Mississippi, Texas, all these different places, you know. And it was a Southern community. It was Southern in every respect. You know, for blacks and Hispanics, you couldn't go a certain area, you know. It was really segregated. It still is. So we grew up in an environment where there was this back and forth going to, you know, the South, you know, in the summer or whatever it is. There was all these stories told about the South, and it was sort of an oral kind of environment where people were talking about all these things, and it was always back home, you know, going back home and this sort of thing.
When was the last time you've been in church?
I went back home. Since then, I've done a lot of things. I haven't done nothing yet to make the devil blush.
I don't have any trouble sleeping. I ain't ashamed of nothing I can't help.
The problem when we were growing up was that if you're from the South, you sort of hated it, you know, because you're from your country, you know, and most of the kids tried to avoid anything that was country, you know. And a lot of the people who were more recent from the South, I guess you could say, still had these country ways, you know, like mud deer, they would call their mother mud deer and all this sort of thing. But the thing was, later on, as you grow up, you learn to appreciate those things, you know, and you draw from them. We never realized, you know, our economic circumstances as kids, you know, we were just having fun. And I remember when I was in school, in this elementary school, and for some reason the teacher asked us, you know, they put rich, middle class, and poor on the board, and he asked us what group are we in. You know, we knew we weren't rich. We didn't think we were poor. We were middle class. And he says, no. We were like, what? And he said, no. One of the other things left was poor. You know? It was interesting. I think one of the things about being from the South was, and living in LA in that particular time, was that there was undeveloped areas and things, and they didn't have the codes they have now, because we had chickens, ducks, rabbits, and all this kind of stuff, you know. And we had eggs and a garden, and so it wasn't like we didn't have anything, you know. If we wanted to eat, we just go out and, my grandmother go out and wring a neck, wring a chicken's neck or whatever it is, you know.
What do you want with another raggedy-ass car for, huh?
Trying to get ahead, man.
You niggas are sick. Now you think you're middle class.
Man, I ain't poor. Look, I give away things to the Salvation Army. You can't give away nothing to the Salvation Army if you poor. I mean, we may not have a damn thing sometimes. You want to see somebody that's poor?
Mm-hmm.
Now you go around and look at Walters. Now they be sitting over an oven and with nothing but a coat on and sitting around there rubbing their knees all day and eating nothing but wild greens picked out of a vacant lot. No, that ain't me. And damn sure won't be.
I mean, he's rich in many other ways, you know, in spirit and things like that. So it's this balance, you know. I mean, people can have everything they want, a Maserati, and poor as heck, in all sorts of ways, you know, particularly spiritual. And I think, and being from the South, that was the thing that we focused on. Yeah, I was listening to this music because my mother played it a lot, you know, and again, I was, at some point, hadn't heard these songs for a while, and I found myself humming, you know, these songs and whistling them. And earlier, when you're a kid and listen to the blues, you really don't understand the blues until you get older with some experience, you know. And then they began to make sense to me, what everyone said, because by that time, you're beginning to have lived a bit, you know, and I've gone through a lot of these emotional things, you know, to some extent. And now they have more meaning. And so, and then because they were like narratives, there were stories being told in music. And they also helped to create images and things like that, and stories themselves. And so, you know, they were really important in doing Killer Sheep. The restoration of Killer Sheep started with Ross Lippman. He called me one day and said, you know, I have this idea. Would you care if we try to get some money to restore your film? And it wasn't a simple thing of just going about doing it. They had to get some money and all that sort of thing to do it, you know. And it was really at a great time because I hadn't looked at the film in a while and hadn't looked at the original material, and it was rotting. It was spoiling. You know, the soundtrack was turning into vinegar and things like that. And so he came about at the right time. And so the restoration started with UCLA with Ross Lippman. I really didn't have a strong reaction to Killer Sheep being labeled as an important black independent film. No, I never anticipated this kind of legacy working on the film. The idea never really was imaginable in a certain sense because there wasn't any means of distribution then, you know. I mean, I should have a reaction, I should have had a reaction, but you're so busy trying to get something else off the ground, you know. And the film is done, it did its job. I got a degree at UCLA. At the end of the day, you have to look at what has it gained in many ways. It did its job, as I mentioned. I mean, people have seen it, you know, and it was used in groups to talk about the black experience and what's going on in the community. And so I'm more happy about that than it shown around in that sort of manner. I have to laugh because I always do things in a strange way, and I say that because when I was told, when the people called me from the registry there was so much noise in the house and the kids were making so much noise, I didn't understand a word they were talking about. And I thought she was asking me about a film festival or something. Why did they elect your film for a certain film festival? And so I gave this sort of pat answer, well, you know, something or other I just said, you know, out of the blue, and then I hung up, and then someone called and said, you know, you got this, I mean, your film has been selected for this thing, you know. I said, yeah. I said, oh, that person called me. That's what she was talking about, you know. And I said, she must think I'm an idiot, a complete idiot, you know. So it was more an embarrassment than anything, you know. So what can you say?